32 years of perfect credit. Never missed a payment. Never carried a balance past 30 days. Built it the same way I built everything else in my life. Slowly, carefully, one responsible decision at a time. And on a Tuesday morning in March, while I was standing in my kitchen making oatmeal, all 32 years of it got used to by a house I'd never seen in a neighborhood I'd never been to, by a daughter I thought I knew. My name is Gary Sutton, 64 years old, retired high school principal from South Salem, Oregon, the east side of the city, a quiet neighborhood of older houses and mature maples where people still rake their own leaves and know which neighbor has the best garden. I spent 31 years running Cascade Ridge High School, which means I spent 31 years watching young people make decisions and understanding in precise clinical detail the difference between a mistake and a choice. A mistake happens once, fast, without full awareness of the consequences. A choice is deliberate. A choice has planning behind it. A choice involves 8 months of mortgage applications. My daughter Jenny is 36. She grew up in this neighborhood, went to Cascade Ridge. Yes, the school I ran, which produced the specific brand of mortification that only a principal's kid can fully appreciate, and moved to Portland after college, where she eventually married a man named Colin Marsh. Colin is 39. He works in commercial real estate, which, in retrospect, explains some things. He has the specific confidence of a man who is always calculating the value of whatever room he's standing in, including the people in it. Jenny has been an authorized user on my Chase Sapphire account since she was 24. It started with a flat tire on I-5 during a rainstorm. She called me. I told her to use the card. She called a tow truck. The problem was solved, and the next month I noticed a $37 charge for roadside assistance and paid it without thinking twice. That was 12 years ago. Since then, the card had been used for Christmas flights home, a car repair, 2 veterinary bills for a dog that has since gone to whatever reward awaits dogs who were better people than most humans I've known, and a handful of grocery runs during lean months. I kept the card there for emergencies. Jenny knew this. We had spoken about it explicitly, more than once. The limit was clear. The purpose was clear. The understanding between a father and a daughter was, I thought, equally clear. I was wrong about the last part. On the morning of Tuesday, March 11th, at 8:47 a.m., my phone rang while I was stirring oatmeal. The number on the screen showed a 503 area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Mr. Sutton? This is Karen Stiles from Pacific Premier Mortgage in Beaverton. I'm calling to follow up on the co-borrower documentation for the Ridgeline Court property. We need one additional piece of identification before we can finalize the closing date. I set my spoon down very slowly. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? The closing documentation for the property at 1247 Ridgeline Court in Beaverton. You're listed as co-borrower on the loan application. We just need a copy of a secondary ID to complete the file. The word co-borrower is doing a lot of work in that sentence. A co-borrower is someone who signs a mortgage application, who submits financial documentation, who formally agrees to be responsible for a loan. I had not done any of these things. I had not signed anything. I had not spoken to Pacific Premier Mortgage in my life. Miss Stiles, what is the purchase price on this property? A brief pause. The purchase price is $400,000. The kitchen was very quiet. My oatmeal was getting cold. And my name is on this application. Yes, sir. As co-borrower, along with Jennifer Marsh and Colin Marsh. Jennifer Marsh. My daughter. Miss Stiles, I need you to note in your records that I am disputing this application. I did not sign anything. I did not authorize my name on any mortgage. Please do not proceed with this closing. A pause. What is the name of your compliance officer? She gave it to me. I wrote it down. I thanked her. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen in South Salem for approximately 90 seconds. Then I went to my computer, opened my Chase account, and looked at the authorized user activity. Nothing unusual on the card itself. Jenny hadn't charged a mortgage to the Chase card. She'd used my credit history and social security number from the authorized user account records to build a loan application that listed me as a co-borrower. She'd used my name, my credit score, my financial identity, like a key she'd had in her pocket for 12 years, waiting to find a door worth opening. I picked up my phone, not to call Jenny, not yet. I called my attorney. His name is Bob Finch. He's been doing family and estate law in Salem for 22 years. Handles contract disputes as well. And he is the kind of man who has heard every version of every family financial disaster and manages to be simultaneously unsurprised and completely prepared. He picked up on the second ring. Bob. Gary Sutton. I've got a situation. What kind? My daughter used my credit identity to apply for a $400,000 mortgage in Beaverton. I found out when the lender called to finalize the closing. A pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Credit fraud. That's my read. Did she have authorized user status on any of your accounts? Chase Sapphire. Since she was 24. For what purpose? Emergencies. Documented. Discussed. Understood. Not a $400,000 house. Another pause. I could hear him writing. Gary. Don't call Jenny yet. Don't give her any indication you know. Come to my office at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Bring every credit account statement you have from the past 24 months and your social security card. I'll be there at 1:50. I know you will. I hung up, made a fresh bowl of oatmeal, ate it standing at the kitchen counter because sometimes you need to do something ordinary while the ground shifts under you. Outside, South Salem was doing what it does on March mornings. A little gray, a little rain, the maples beginning to think about budding. Normal. Steady. The kind of morning that has no idea what's happening inside the house. I didn't know yet what my full credit report was going to show. I didn't know yet about the 8 months of text messages between Jenny and Colin that a civil subpoena would eventually surface. And I absolutely did not know yet that the phrase, "someday maybe," a casual offhand comment I had made at a dinner table 4 years ago, had been turned into a documented financial strategy by my son-in-law. I rinsed my bowl, got dressed, and went to find a 32-year-old credit report that was apparently community property. Bob Finch's office is on Commercial Street in downtown Salem, in a converted Victorian that smells like good coffee and old paper. His paralegal, a sharp young woman named Sarah, who has worked for Bob for 9 years, and has the memory of an archivist and the expression of someone who is never surprised by anything, had me seated with a water and a notepad before Bob finished his previous call. Bob came in at 2:03, shook my hand, sat across from me, and opened a fresh legal pad. Walk me through everything. Every detail. Start with how long ago she got the authorized user status, and don't leave anything out. I walked him through it. All of it. The flat tire in 2013, the 12 years of reasonable and unreasonable charges, the explicit conversations about the card being for emergencies, and the phone call from Karen Stiles at Pacific Premier Mortgage at 8:47 that morning. Bob wrote without interrupting. When I finished, he looked at his notes. Has she ever used the account for anything that required her to have your full social security number? Any account linking? Any? The realization arrived as I said it. When I added her to the account in 2013, Chase required her to provide my social security number to verify the primary account holder's identity. Bob nodded slowly. So she's had your social security number for 12 years. The room was very quiet. She didn't use the Chase card for the mortgage, Bob continued. She used your social security number, your credit score, and your financial identity, obtained through 12 years of legitimate authorized user access, to construct a mortgage application that names you as co-borrower. The authorized user agreement gave her access to your identity, not the right to use it for independent financial transactions. That's credit fraud. That's credit fraud. He put down his pen. Gary, I want to pull your full credit report right now. All 3 bureaus. Before we do anything else, can you give me authorization to do that? Sarah appeared in the doorway without being called. Bob pulled my Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian reports in sequence and printed all 3. The stack he put on the table between us was 11 pages. I looked at it. Is that? How many accounts? 2 credit cards opened in your name that I'm assuming you didn't open. 1 authorized user account, the Chase card. 1 inquiry from Pacific Premier Mortgage dating to August of last year. He looked at me. She started the mortgage application process 8 months ago, Gary. August. 8 months ago. Last August, I had driven Jenny and Colin to the Portland airport for a trip to see Colin's family in Phoenix. We'd had coffee at the airport. Jenny had hugged me at the security line. She'd said she loved me. 8 months ago, she had already started the application. The betrayal has a timeline. That makes it worse. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. Bob and I spent 2 hours going through every line of those 11 pages. By 4:15 p.m. on Tuesday, March 11th, we had identified the following: 2 credit inquiries from lenders I didn't recognize, both from the previous year. A soft inquiry from a credit monitoring service I'd never enrolled in, suggesting someone had set up a monitoring alert on my credit profile to track my score before making a major application. And a hard inquiry from Pacific Premier Mortgage, dated August 14th of last year. She was monitoring your credit score before the application, Bob said, to make sure it was strong enough. She knew my score. She had authorized user access. She was careful. My daughter, who I had taught to drive in the South Salem High parking lot, who I had moved 3 times, who I had watched cry at her own wedding, she had been careful. Bob, what are we filing? He looked at his notes. Then he looked at me with the expression of a man who has done this a long time and understands exactly what happens next. 3 things. First, an FTC identity theft report. This establishes the federal record and starts the clock on your protections. Second, a dispute with all 3 credit bureaus removing your name from the mortgage application. This is time-sensitive because the closing date may be imminent. Third, a civil fraud complaint against Jennifer and Colin Marsh in Marion County Circuit Court. He paused. The civil complaint triggers discovery, which means we will eventually see every document, every email, every text message related to this transaction. File all 3. By Friday, today if possible. He actually smiled, very slightly. The smile of a man who has represented a lot of people and knows the difference between someone who is angry and someone who is prepared. The FTC report we can file tonight. The credit bureau disputes go out tomorrow morning. The civil complaint, I can have a draft to you by Thursday evening, filed Friday morning. That works. Don't call Jenny tonight. Don't give her any indication. The moment she knows you're filing, Colin will start moving assets and you'll spend a year chasing them. I wasn't planning to call her. I know. He picked up his pen again, but I needed to say it out loud. I drove home to South Salem in the March rain. Made dinner, pasta, nothing complicated. Watched the evening news without retaining a single word of it. Went to bed at 10. Jenny called at 9:15. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. By that point, I'd already been in Bob's office for 2 hours. The FTC report was half drafted, and the text message I'd sent to my old friend Pete Grady, who runs a private investigations firm in Eugene, had already been read. I didn't know yet what Pete was going to find when he started looking at Colin Marsh's financial history. I didn't know yet what 8 months of text messages between Jenny and Colin were going to reveal about exactly how this plan was constructed. But I knew one thing with the same certainty I'd used to run a high school for 31 years. The people who underestimate a principal are always the ones who've never had to sit across from one. The thing about 31 years of being a principal is that you develop a very specific skill. You learn to read backwards from the consequence to the decision. A student throws a chair in a classroom. You don't ask why they're angry, you ask what happened in the 48 hours before that led them to a place where throwing a chair felt like the only available option. Work back from the consequence. Rebuild the decision chain. Find the moment when a different choice was still possible. I spent Wednesday rebuilding the decision chain. Wednesday, March 12th, 6 a.m. Coffee, legal pad, everything I knew written out in chronological order. The dinner where I mentioned helping them with a house. Someday. Bob had asked me about this at our Tuesday meeting. I dug through my memory and found it. Thanksgiving 3 years ago, 2022, sitting at Jenny's Portland apartment. Colin had been talking about real estate. He always talked about real estate and had mentioned a neighborhood in Beaverton where prices were moving. I had said casually, the way you say things at Thanksgiving when everything feels warm and comfortable and like the future is full of reasonable options. If you two ever find the right place, I might be able to help with a down payment. That was it. One sentence, no amount mentioned, no timeline, no commitment. The verbal equivalent of a mayonnaise lid that you notice is loose and mean to tighten and forget about until someone opens the jar and the lid comes off in their hand. Colin heard that sentence at Thanksgiving 2022 and apparently filed it under actionable. Wednesday morning I called Pete Grady in Eugene. Pete is 62, Former Oregon State Police, runs a two-person investigations firm out of an office above a coffee shop on Willamette Street. We've been friends since 1997, when we coached opposing youth soccer teams and discovered we had identical opinions about referees, parenting, and what constitutes a fair call. He's done background work for me twice before, once for a personnel matter at the school, once for a property dispute with a former neighbor. He is thorough, quiet, and completely discreet. Gary, what are we looking at? Colin Marsh, 40 years old, commercial real estate in Portland. I need his full financial profile, business entities, property holdings, any litigation history, anything that suggests a pattern of using other people's credit or assets for his own transactions. This about your daughter? Yes. Another pause. How bad? $400,000 mortgage using my identity as co-borrower. 8 months of planning we've already documented. I want to know if this is the first time he's done something like this, or if there's a pattern. Give me 24 hours. You've got it. The second call Wednesday morning was to Bob Finch. FTC report filed at 11:17 last night, Bob said before I got through the greeting. Credit Bureau disputes went out at 8 this morning. Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. All three have 48 to 72-hour processing times. I'm watching for a response from Pacific Premier Mortgage. What happens when they get the dispute? They are legally required to pause the closing process pending investigation. Karen Stiles, the loan officer who called you, was doing her job. She reached out to you for documentation because something in the application triggered a secondary review. That call saved you, Gary. If they'd closed without that call, unwinding it would have taken months. She saved me an attorney bill. Several. The civil complaint draft is on your desk electronically. Check it this afternoon, mark any factual corrections, and we file Friday morning at 9 a.m. I'll have corrections to you by 8 p.m. Thursday. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and thought about Jenny, not about what she'd done. I had spent most of Tuesday night going over that particular territory until there was nothing left to discover. What I thought about Wednesday morning was the version of Jenny I knew before Colin. The Jenny who had called me from college at 11 p.m. because she was struggling with her statistics class. The Jenny who had driven 4 hours from Portland on a random Saturday 2 years after her mother and I divorced, just to have lunch and check that I was okay. The Jenny who cried at sentimental movies and adopted stray animals and always had the specific emotional generosity of someone who felt other people's pain as if it were her own. That Jenny did not independently decide to commit credit fraud against her father. That Jenny was given a plan by a man she trusted and told it was reasonable, and then talked herself into executing it because she trusted him more than she trusted her own instincts. That was my read. I could be wrong, but I had spent 31 years reading people, and that was my read. Thursday, March 13th, Pete Grady called at 11:15 a.m. Gary, sit down. Sit down anyway. I sat down. Colin Marsh has 3 LLCs registered in Oregon. 2 are active commercial real estate entities, legitimate operations, nothing unusual. The third was incorporated in 2019 and dissolved in 2022. In that 3-year window, the LLC was named on 2 civil complaints, both settled out of court, involving allegations of misrepresented financial guarantees in commercial lease agreements. A pause. In plain English, he convinced 2 separate counterparties that a guaranteed financial backing existed when it didn't. He used phantom credit as leverage. That is one way to describe it. The 2 settlements are sealed. I can't get the amounts, but the LLC dissolved 8 months after the second settlement. My read? He settled both cases. The LLC became a liability. He shut it down and moved on. I looked at the kitchen wall. Outside, Salem was doing its March thing. Gray sky, slow rain. The maples not yet committed to spring. Pete, timeline on the LLC dissolution. Dissolved October 2022. That's 1 month before the Thanksgiving dinner, where I mentioned helping with a down payment. A very long pause. Gary, he was already looking for his next instrument. I can't confirm that as a fact. You don't have to. What do you want to do with this? Send it to Bob Finch. Everything. The LLCs, the civil complaints, the settlement timeline. Bob's using it as background for the civil complaint and discovery requests. Already writing it up. After I hung up with Pete, I made a second cup of coffee and sat with it for a long time. Colin Marsh had dissolved a liability LLC 1 month before Thanksgiving 2022. He'd attended that dinner knowing he had 2 sealed civil settlements on his record. He'd listened to his father-in-law make an offhand comment about maybe helping with a house someday. And he'd gone home that night and started planning. I had 31 years of watching young people make decisions. Colin was not a young person making a bad decision. Colin was a 40-year-old man with a documented pattern, a willing instrument he'd been working on for years, and a father-in-law with a 32-year credit history and an authorized user account that was worth approximately $400,000 if deployed correctly. I had been an instrument in someone else's transaction. I just hadn't known it yet. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, thank you, for real. Thursday evening, I sat down with Bob's civil complaint draft. It was 14 pages, and it was by any measure a serious document. Bob had listed every discoverable action: the unauthorized use of my social security number, the forged co-borrower status, the undisclosed prior civil history of one of the defendants, and a specific section on the 8-month timeline that characterized the mortgage application as premeditated financial fraud rather than impulsive misuse of an authorized user account. The distinction matters legally. Premeditated fraud carries significantly different exposure than impulsive fraud. The 8-month planning window, documented through the August credit inquiry, the credit monitoring service enrollment, and the timeline Pete had established around the LLC dissolution, made the premeditation argument extremely strong. I marked 3 factual corrections: minor, 2 dates, and 1 address, and emailed the corrected draft to Bob at 7:49 p.m. Then I did something I hadn't done since Tuesday morning. I called Jenny, not because Bob told me to. He'd specifically said to wait until the complaint was filed, but I had spent 2.5 days reconstructing the decision chain, understanding the architecture of what Colin had built, reading the text messages I didn't yet have, but could already predict the content of, and I needed to hear my daughter's voice, not to warn her, not to confront her, just to hear whether she was still there, underneath whatever Colin had made her into. She picked up on the first ring. Dad. Her voice was careful. Careful in the specific way of someone who has been waiting for a call and is trying to determine what the call means. Jenny. I called Tuesday. You didn't. I know. I was dealing with something. A long pause. Is everything okay? No, sweetheart. Nothing is okay. Your husband used you to commit credit fraud against me, and I've spent 48 hours building the legal case that will cost both of you the house, his financial reputation, and possibly his business standing. And I still love you, and I don't know what to do with both of those things at the same time. I'm fine. Just wanted to hear your voice. I kept it even. The principal voice, the one that gives nothing away before it needs to. How are you? Another pause. Longer. I'm good. We're good. Good. A beat. Get some sleep, Jenny. You too, Dad. I hung up, sat in the South Salem quiet for a while, then I went to bed. Friday morning was coming fast, and so was 9 o'clock. The most powerful thing a prepared man can do is nothing dramatic, no scene, no confrontation in a driveway, no voicemail that becomes evidence for the wrong side. Just a Friday morning, a cup of coffee, and a filed complaint that lands on a defendant's desk like a stone dropped from a very great height. Friday, March 14th, 8:59 a.m. Bob Finch filed the civil complaint in Marion County Circuit Court. I know the exact time because he texted me. Filed. 8:59. Formal service initiated. Expect 48 to 72 hours for process delivery. I was sitting on my back porch in South Salem drinking coffee when the text came in. The maples were doing something tentative with their buds. Not committing. Just considering. The kind of morning that makes no promises. I put my phone in my pocket and finished the coffee. The process server reached Colin Marsh at his Portland commercial real estate office at 2:17 p.m. on Friday afternoon. I know this because the service confirmation came to Bob's office at 2:42 p.m. with a time-stamped signature. Colin Marsh, named defendant, had personally signed for a 14-page civil fraud complaint at his own desk in front of his assistant on a Friday afternoon. Bob called me at 3 p.m. Served. Both of them? The process server will reach Jenny at the Ridgeline Court property this evening. She's been at the house all week, which tells us she knew the closing was imminent and was preparing to move in. She was already treating it as her house. I let that sit for a moment. What happens now? Colin will retain an attorney by end of business today. He's a commercial real estate professional. He has legal contacts. Jenny will retain one separately, which is what I'd advise her to do given that their legal interests are not aligned. A pause. The credit bureau disputes are already in processing. Pacific Premier Mortgage received the FTC report notification this morning and has voluntarily paused the closing pending review. So the house is frozen. The house is frozen. Nobody's moving in. Nobody's closing. And Colin Marsh has a 14-page civil fraud complaint with his LLC history attached as an exhibit. I looked at the Salem skyline, the Capitol Dome visible on a clear day, just visible today through the thin March overcast. 31 years I'd worked in this city, built something here, and for 8 months while I was raking leaves and making oatmeal and dropping people off at airports, my credit history had been the foundation of someone else's plan. Bob, what's the realistic outcome? Realistic? The civil complaint creates significant pressure. Colin's attorney will want to settle quickly to avoid discovery, because discovery means those text messages. Every planning conversation he and Jenny had about this transaction becomes producible evidence. He will not want a jury to see 8 months of text messages showing a husband coaching his wife through the mechanics of using her father's social security number to buy a house. A pause. My offer will be, unwind the mortgage, remove your name from all filings, restore your credit in full, and pay my attorney's fees. In exchange, I don't push the criminal referral. And if they refuse, then we push the criminal referral, which adds Oregon's identity theft statutes on top of the civil complaint. At that point, Colin's career in commercial real estate becomes significantly more complicated. Send the settlement offer. The offer went out Friday afternoon. Colin's attorney, a man named Steve Raft who handles commercial real estate litigation in Portland, called Bob Monday morning. The conversation, as Bob related to me, lasted 11 minutes. By the end of it, Colin and Jenny had agreed to unwind the mortgage application, remove my name from all Pacific Premier mortgage filings, cooperate with the credit bureau restoration process, and pay Bob's attorney's fees in full. In exchange, no criminal referral, no further civil action. The settlement was signed Wednesday, March 19th. My credit bureau records were corrected within 30 days. By the end of March, my credit report showed no unauthorized inquiries, no contested co-borrower applications, and a score that had dropped 7 points during the dispute process and recovered fully within 6 weeks. 32 years and 7 days of building something. 30 days to take it back. There is one more thing, the part that I've been holding off telling you, because it requires me to be honest about something that isn't easy to be honest about. On the Saturday after the settlement, March 22nd, Jenny called me. I answered. She was crying. Not the performative kind, not the kind that wants something. The specific, exhausted, I've been holding this for a week kind that comes out when the legal situation has settled, and there's nothing left to hide behind, and the weight of what you've done becomes the only thing in the room with you. Dad, I don't know how to. Then don't try to find the words right now. I didn't. Colin said you'd mentioned it at Thanksgiving. He said it was basically already agreed. He said, Jenny. My voice was level, the principal voice, but softer. I know what Colin said. I've seen the text messages. A long silence. You have? Discovery was part of the complaint process before the settlement. Bob shared what was relevant. A pause. Jenny, Colin took something you said and turned it into something you did. That's on him. But you made the calls. You signed the forms. You were in the room every time. Another pause. That part is yours to carry. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, is it over? Between us? Is it over between us? My daughter asking me that question. No. I said it simply, because it was simply true. But it's different now. It's going to be different for a while. I know. Colin. We separated 2 days after the complaint was filed. Her voice was quiet. He moved out. I didn't say anything. I didn't allow myself to feel what I wanted to feel about that. I'm sorry, Jenny. Are you? I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm not sorry I filed. Another long pause. That's a very dad answer. I've had 30, 1 years of practice. She almost laughed. The real kind. The brief, reluctant, involuntary kind that happens when something lands exactly right, even in the middle of something awful. Can we talk? Not about this. Just, can we talk sometime? Call me Sunday. What time? Noon. I'll be on the porch. Okay. Get some rest, Jenny. You too, Dad. I hung up, sat on my South Salem porch in the late March evening. The maples had committed small green buds all the way down the street, the specific color of early spring in Oregon, that looks almost too vivid to be real, the kind of thing that happens whether you're watching it or not. Colin Marsh had taken a casual, generous Thanksgiving dinner sentence and turned it into an 8-month strategy. He had treated my daughter as a vehicle and my credit as fuel. He had dissolved one liability and moved to the next without breaking stride. He had underestimated one thing, that the father-in-law whose credit he was using had spent 31 years in a building where the consequences of bad decisions were the primary product, and he knew how to read a decision chain all the way back to the beginning. By the end of March, my credit was restored. The house was back on the market. Colin Marsh had a civil fraud settlement on his record, and my daughter was calling me on Sundays at noon. I was on the porch when she called that first Sunday. The maples were doing what March maples do in South Salem. And 2 years of building something, carefully, slowly, one responsible decision at a time, were exactly where I'd left them. Some things hold because you built them right. Some things hold because you refuse to let someone else tear them down. Those two things are, in the end, the same thing.